My name is Eleanor Brooks, and for most of my life I believe that love, once given honestly, would always return in the same form. I lived in a quiet town called Maplewood, a place where people knew each other's names, where the streets smelled of rain and old trees, and where memories seemed to settle into the walls of every house. I was a single mother, and my entire world revolved around my son Daniel Brooks. From the moment I first held him, tiny and warm against my chest, I promised myself that no matter how hard life became, he would never feel alone. I worked long hours at the local library, carefully shelving books and helping children choose stories, always thinking of Daniel and how one day he would read those same pages. Daniel grew up gentle and curious. As a child, he would sit at the kitchen table while I cooked, telling me about his day at school, about his friend Lucas, about the drawings he made for his teacher Mrs. Carter. I listened to every word, even when I was tired, because his voice reminded me why I kept going. We didn't have much money, but our home was full of warmth. On cold evenings, we shared soup and stories. On weekends, we walked to the park, and Daniel would race ahead, laughing, always turning back to make sure I was still there. As years passed, Daniel grew taller, quieter, more thoughtful. He became ambitious, dreaming of a life beyond Maplewood. He talked about studying engineering, about big cities, about opportunities one had never known. I supported him with all my heart, even though a part of me feared the distance that would grow between us. When he was accepted into a university in the city, I cried with pride and fear mixed together. On the day he left, standing at the bus station, Daniel hugged me tightly and said, "Mom, I'll call you every week. I promise." I smiled, believing him completely. At first, he kept his word. He called on Sundays, telling me about his classes, his new friends, especially a young woman named Emily Parker, who studied design and shared his love for late-night coffee and long conversations. I was happy for him. I told myself that this was how life worked: children grow, they leave, and parents learn to let go. But slowly, the calls became shorter. Then they became less frequent. Weeks passed with no word. I tried not to worry, telling myself he was busy. Life in Maplewood grew quieter without Daniel. The house felt larger, the silence heavier. I continued working at the library, greeting familiar faces like Mr. Harris, the elderly man who borrowed history books, and Anna Lewis, a young mother who reminded me of myself years ago. They often asked about Daniel, and I always smiled and said he was doing well. At night, I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker, waiting for my phone to ring. One winter evening, after months without hearing from him, I finally called Daniel myself. The phone rang several times before he answered. His voice sounded distant, distracted. I asked how he was, how his studies were going. He answered politely but briefly. When I told him I missed him, there was a pause. Then he said, "Mom, I'm really busy right now. I'll call you later." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my hands shaking, feeling a sharp pain I had never known before. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Daniel did not call. I sent messages that remained unread. I wrote emails filled with love and concern, but received no reply. The fear inside me slowly transformed into sadness, then into a deep loneliness. I began to question myself, wondering if I had done something wrong, if I had held him too tightly or not enough. During this time, my health began to decline. Long hours and emotional stress took their toll. One afternoon, while organizing books, I felt dizzy and collapsed. I woke up in the hospital, greeted by Nurse Clara, who spoke gently and reassured me. The doctor advised rest and less stress. When he asked if I had family who could help, I hesitated, then said quietly, "My son lives far away." He nodded, unaware of the pain behind my words, returned home weaker than before. My neighbor, Mrs. Helen Wright, an old friend, began visiting me often, bringing soup and sitting with me in the evenings. She listened as I finally spoke about Daniel, about the silence, about the feeling of being left behind. She held my hand and said, "Children don't always understand the cost of their freedom. But life has a way of teaching lessons." Her words comforted me, though they did not erase the achy years past. My hair turned gray, my steps slower. I retired from the library, leaving behind a place filled with memories. Maplewood remained the same, but I felt like a shadow moving through familiar streets. Occasionally, I heard news about Daniel through social media posts shared by others. I saw pictures of him smiling beside Emily, of a modern apartment, of celebrations I was not part of. Each image felt like a reminder that his life had moved on without me. One rainy afternoon, as I sorted through old photographs, I found a picture of Daniel as a child, standing in the park, holding my hand tightly. I pressed the photo to my chest and whispered his name. That night, something inside me shifted. I realized that while my heart was broken, it was still capable of love, not bitterness. I decided to write Daniel a letter, not to accuse him, but to share my truth. I wrote about my pride in him, about my loneliness, about the quiet house and the memories that lived within its walls. I told him I loved him, no matter what. I mailed the letter and released my expectations, unsure if it would ever be read. Months later, on a bright spring morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it slowly and froze. Standing there was Daniel. He looked older, more serious, his eyes filled with emotions I couldn't immediately read. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said softly, "Mom." My legs trembled as I stepped aside to let him in. Inside the house, surrounded by the echoes of his childhood, Daniel finally spoke. He told me about the pressure of his studies, about his fear of failure, about how he had convinced himself that staying away was easier than facing the guilt of leaving. He admitted that he had read my letter many times before finding the courage to come. Tears streamed down his face as he said, "I thought I was building my future, but I didn't realize I was losing you." I listened, my heart heavy but open. I told him how his absence had hurt, how loneliness had crept into my life, but also how my love for him had never faded. We cried together, years of silence breaking into understanding. Daniel stayed with me for several weeks, helping around the house, walking with me through Maplewood, revisiting old places filled with memories. Before he left again, he promised that things would be different. This time, I did not cling to promises. I understood that love cannot be forced, only offered. But as he hugged me goodbye, I felt hope, not because he might call more often, but because we had finally spoken honestly. Life continued, quieter but lighter. Daniel kept in touch, not perfectly, but sincerely. I learned that letting go does not mean losing love, and that forgiveness can heal wounds time alone cannot. The moral of this story is simple yet profound. Success and ambition should never come at the cost of human relationships. Parents may sacrifice their lives for their children, but children must remember that love and gratitude are responsibilities, not options. Time can never be reclaimed, and the hearts we neglect may not always wait forever. True growth comes not from leaving people behind, but from carrying their love with us wherever we go. If you liked this video, please share it with others, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more meaningful English learning stories.